10 weeks, that's all it took to fire Shane Waldron. Can Thomas Brown do anything to make this year one with Caleb Williams more successful than it's looked so far? We do have breaking news as we're going to get into the playoff picture if we have time, but this is hot off the presses. Adam Schefter is reporting that the Bears, Michael, we just talked about it last hour. What could Ryan Poles, Matt Eberflus do to save year number one here for Caleb Williams? Well, 10 weeks, that's all it took to fire Shane Waldron as the offensive coordinator. According to reports, he is out as the OC. Michael, I got to get hot off the presses. What is your thought process here?
Well, think about this. Luke Getsy was the Bears' offensive coordinator. He got fired last year from the Bears, got hired from the Raiders, and he got fired after 9 weeks. And now all of a sudden Waldron gets fired, who was in Seattle, was handpicked by Matt Eberflus. To me, it's all this is really kind of frustrating to me because it all goes back to philosophy, right? Who in their right mind thinks you can line up in Chicago, Illinois, on the shores of Lake Michigan, and be in three receivers and pay $50 million to receivers and pay another $20 million to tight ends and pay another $10 million to running backs and think you're going to be able to be a physical, tough team? This team's soft. We know it. It's soft. Watch them. They can't run the ball. They need a loose play here or a loose play there. And I think, to me, would we be having this conversation if it wasn't as bad as, that Hail Mary didn't come through? Probably not. But it still wouldn't undermine the problem, right? The problem is this Bears team has no identity to the city that they operate in. And you're putting all this on a young quarterback who is not playing well, can't throw the ball over 10 yards with any accuracy at all, makes no explosive plays down the field. You paid all this money for two receivers that have 66 catches and average under 10 yards a catch. Now, they've scored 5 touchdowns. Woo-hoo. But you've only scored in 23 possessions. It just, to me, they're blaming somebody. And this is what's going to be game.
And so Waldron is out, again, 10 weeks in. And I am curious, they did have a really good fourth quarter with a couple touchdown drives there. The best maybe that Caleb had looked in D.C. leading up to the Hail Mary, and then it just went south the last 2 weeks. The offense looking completely non-competitive and non-existent. Thomas Brown, by all reports, is expected to take over this offense. So, Michael, I think you gave the blueprint of what Brown should do, but can that offense, the way they're constructed, can Thomas Brown do anything to make this year one with Caleb Williams more successful than it's looked so far?
No, because the offensive line is like a command center. If you can't control the line of scrimmage, how are you going to run the ball, right? I mean, how are you going to run the ball? Now, Thomas Brown comes from he's also from the Sean McVay tree, right? Another Sean McVay disciple. He was in Carolina last year. There was all sorts of hope by a lot of pundits that when he took over for the offense from Frank Wright, it was going to turn around immediately. Well, it never happened, right? Now, it was a tough situation. They weren't good enough in the offensive line, just like they're not good enough in Chicago. And here's the other issue is when you pay receivers and you can't protect, these receivers don't care about nobody protecting. They want the ball.
Right.
So, Thomas Brown's going to try to walk in there and try to make somebody happy. When in reality, he needs to walk in there and make the offense tougher. That's a hard thing to do. You're going to have to get cooperation from the players. So it's a tough job. And you knew Waldron was going to take the blame for it because from the time I watched them this summer, I kept saying there's no physicality to their team. They've set this team up like a 7-on-7 team playing Madden in the basement.
Is this, and again, we've talked about this with head coaches, firing them midseason. You mentioned Getsy out and some other offensive coordinators, in Las Vegas that got fired as well. We've seen this in the past. Like Ken Dorsey comes to mind in Buffalo. They made the change to Joe Brady. It seemed to work, at least for the end of the year in Buffalo. Can this be a signal to the players that says, hey, look, we just canned the OC. So, next we're going to run out of coaches. It's going to be the players that are going to go in the offseason. Does that signal anything to them? Or is this just change and kind of rearranging the deck chairs here in the Titanic?
Well, I think what happens is what you do is you take the blame off the players. You say it's not your fault, it's scheme play. Remember, everything that's related to football, it comes down to 3 categories: players, coaches, and scheme. right? And so the coach just got fired. So that means the players in the scheme are okay, right? Now, if you make some changes in scheme and you make some changes in players, you're going to have to time that up together. But right now, whenever the interim coach comes in, basically you're saying the last guy was horrible, this guy will fix it. Well, that's not always the case. Look at the Jets. The Jets actually have gotten worse on defense since they've fired Bobby Saleh. I mean, they've gotten worse. Now, and that's not fair to Jeff Albrecht because he's trying to be a head coach and a coordinator, and he can't do both jobs, right? But they're down a man. They lost the coach. Just like they're going to lose a coach on offense. And Brown's going to call the game. He has experience calling the game. We saw him do it in Carolina. What's going to be the outside zone play? Okay, that's what they run anyway. I mean, he can't change everything, just like Todd Dowling couldn't change everything that Nathaniel Hackett did at the Jets. How's that worked out for him?
Yeah, that offensive play, that's receding there in New York as well. It's curious, the timing of it. It is ironic that we had just had the conversation in hour one about this, and then I don't know if they were watching the show, but boom, all of a sudden, big change there with Shane Waldron out as the OC. And again, Thomas Brown is expected to take over. And as you mentioned, run the football. That would probably be job number one.
Thanks for watching, but don't let the betting insights end here. If you want an extra edge this football season, you can get a month of VSiN Pro right now, absolutely free. That means access to our betting insights, analysis, and tools like our betting splits at zero cost to you. Click the link in the description to sign up.